Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO and VC podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, and business and investing from the inside out. And today I am welcoming to the show Robin Butler. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And I kind of just yelled hello. I got a bit excited, and I'm getting more and more excited as I'm talking to people on the podcast. I don't know what it is, whether it's just this energy I feel, the vibes I feel, even though you're on the other side of the world and here I am. Remind me where exactly you are right now, Robin.
I am in London.
London, that's right. I was like whispering as we were doing the 5 second countdown, where are you? London, 11 a.m. Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? What are the vibes like in London today?
It is sunny later in the week. It's currently raining, but we don't have the tube strike that we were meant to have, so
Oh,
things
that's
are
good.
looking right.
Yeah, cool. And you've got this amazing fish behind you, and it's not actually probably doing it enough justice because the length of it is somewhat a little bit cut off here. And when I met you the other week, I was like, oh, there's a whole story behind this fish, and I'll get you to share a little bit more about that. So let's get into the conversation. You're a partner at Sturgeon Capital, and Robin, your work is centered on building venture ecosystems in places most global investors have so far have potentially overlooked long before the market began paying attention. And so as a partner at Sturgeon Capital, you've been deeply involved in the emergence of Central Asia's startup and venture landscape, where you help support founders, capital networks, and innovation infrastructure across a region that only a few years ago had little form of venture ecosystem to speak of. So essentially it's an emerging market, right? Your perspective is shaped by operating inside markets still being defined right now, where progress depends less on the hype, on all the noise, and more on the patience, the long-term horizon thinking, and the willingness to build trust before outcomes are even obvious. And so rather than approaching venture through what I'd like to say pattern recognition alone, your work reflects a belief that some of the most meaningful opportunities emerge in places where ecosystems are still forming, where founders, investors, and institutions are collectively shaping what the future could become, hence why it's called an emerging market. As your journey sits a broader exploration of what it takes to build that momentum, connection, and belief in environments where the infrastructure, capital, and certainty are still catching up. When you booked in for the pod, and I loved this bit, and I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience where you are reshaping, life, leadership, business, and investing, you said Sturgeon was the first international venture investor in Central Asia back in 2019, so pre-COVID, and we've been on the ground there ever since, as the ecosystem has gone from practically zero to a dynamic, interconnected landscape. I love this interconnected language of startups, investors, and stakeholders, still with a long way to go, exclamation mark. Tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about
absolutely.
your journey. What an exciting journey you're on.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, like, when we started investing in Central Asia, the government didn't recognize that software was technology. And the only hardware was considered to be technology. So the idea
Right.
of startups as what people would think, sort of software businesses, it wasn't something the governments were even aware of back then. Now you fast forward to today, and you have huge levels of government support. You have very large, very significant startups that have been built, that have scaled not only regionally, nationally and regionally, but globally as well. And so it's an interesting exercise sometimes when you're in the weeds of it day to day, week to week, that you feel like nothing's really changing. And then you take a step back and think, well, actually, in the last 7 years, a lot has changed.
Is that like a perspective thing for you? Like, when you say you're in the weeds and when you almost look up, like, what did you and Sturgeon do to change government's mind or educate them on hardware to software? And like 7 years, it's a short period of time to go from like not understanding it to now, especially in an emerging startup ecosystem or something that didn't even exist. What was it that you guys did that enabled this to, I guess, transpire the way it has in 7 years?
I mean, I'd never want to overstate our own sort of impact or involvement. In the end, we're a private sector player making sort of private investments into these early stage companies. I guess what we help to do is to send a signal to the government of what it is that international investors are interested in, and that being kind of companies that can capitalize on that shift from offline to online, that kind of secular trend of digitalization that you've seen play out in other markets in Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia, and is now sort of really picking up pace in Central Asia. But I think at a sort of higher level as well, you have in one of the most interesting things about these countries is that they have a very young population. The
Yeah.
median age is between 22 and 28. That population is well educated, but clearly you need to create employment opportunities. Maybe in the past you relied on, and particularly in a sort of during the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Union, that kind of state-directed economy, of large manufacturing or sort of agriculture bases that soaked up those sort of new entrants to the employment sector. But that doesn't work anymore. There are now too many young people coming in, and you need to create sort of alternative employment opportunities. And one of the ways, yes, you can still go and build factories. You can still go and look to build out that manufacturing capacity in the way that a lot of countries in sort of South Asia, Southeast Asia have done to leapfrog from more sort of agricultural societies to more technologically and economically advanced. But within that, you need that sort of digital IT sector, which includes both outsourcing, outstaffing businesses, but also kind of technology startups to build solutions locally and also ones that can scale globally because they create employment opportunities, high paid, sort of long-term employment opportunities as well.
And it's interesting you talk about that because a younger generation, as you know, and then obviously there's all the opportunities. There's also all the challenges, and then and the need to, I guess, diversify. Taking a step right back, Central Asia, emerging market in terms of Sturgeon, and being the first international venture investor in there. What was it like? How did you go about selecting Central Asia? Like, did you guys think that, because there's quite a few emerging markets. What was it about Central Asia that was appealing to you and Sturgeon?
So Sturgeon has actually been around for nearly 20 years now,
Mm.
and has actually always operated in Central Asia and the Caucasus. Hence the name, hence the
Ah,
sturgeon, that connection to the fish in the Caspian Sea, this idea of producing something of quality and of value in caviar, and that being our investments. And a little bit more maybe tenuous or otherwise, like sturgeon have been around for 200 million years. They're one of the oldest living creatures on the planet. And so there's this idea of surviving and adapting through sort of
love it.
cycles and evolving as well. And the other creature that's been around as long as the cockroach, and cockroach capital wasn't quite as sexy as sturgeon capitals.
It's a whole use of cockroach capital. Oh my goodness.
So I mean, Central Asia for us is kind of, let's say, in the firm's sort of DNA, and has been where we've operated for, as I said, nearly 20 years now.
Yeah, right.
Now, we started as a public markets investor. So when we originally founded, and for the first sort of 12 or 13 years, we were investing in public markets in the region. The thesis at its very core was still the same, is that this was a market that was overlooked by international investors.
Is that the case, Robin? Why is it overlooked? What is it that is overlooked? But is it because of all the bureaucracy? Why does it get overlooked?
So I think from a kind of uh, historical perspective is during the Soviet Union, as part of the Soviet Union, it was effectively shut off from the global economy. Everything fed into Mother Russia, and that was the sort of dynamic. And you could not, as an international investor, do business there. You could hardly sort of travel there anyway. And so I think it kind of existed. It didn't exist as a region that people would be thinking about for investment. At the fall of the Soviet Union and during the 1990s, the different countries fared differently. You had sort of quite a lot of domestic conflict or disturbance as these countries adjusted from being sort of that sort of authoritarian, centralized Russian control to typically quite authoritarian, but sort of more local kind of control through the 90s. Into the 2000s, it started to gain a little bit more sort of momentum, especially Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, because of the sort of rising commodity prices and commodity super cycle. There was a point where Kazakhstan was sort of really was the next big thing in the build up pre sort of global financial crisis. Georgia as well went through the Rose Revolution, and that again sort of created more interest as they introduced these pretty wide ranging libertarian reforms that unlocked a lot of economic growth. Then you had global financial crisis, and that took a lot of the wind out of the sails for the region. The sort of falling commodity crisis prices impacted significantly on Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, which were the two largest markets. Georgia was actually then invaded by Russia around the same time. So again, you had that sort of, you'd taken 2 or 3 steps forward, but you certainly took 1, if not 2 steps back. And so all of these things meant that until really in the last 5 to 10 years, and what also then happened in 2016. So up until 2016, Uzbekistan had still been ruled by the same individual that had sort of been in charge at the end of the Soviet Union, Karimov, and his policy was to largely shut off the country from the
Mm-hmm.
regional and global economy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to say it was as shut off as somewhere like North Korea is going a bit far, but to give you a
Yeah.
sense that that's the same kind of level that we're talking about here. He died in 2016, and his former prime minister, Mirziyoyev, came to power and went on what you could say was a bit of a sort of reform rampage, opening up the economy, reintegrating regionally and globally. And probably at last, or for the first time since the Soviet Union, you could really start to think about Central Asia as as a region. Until that point, you could do business in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan if you were very brave. But Uzbekistan, 35 million people, it's the largest country by population in the region. It's the only one that borders all of the other countries in the region as well. So without that, it was like we were missing the kind of heart of the
Yeah.
region. Now with that reintegrated, you can talk about the sort of 80 million people. You can really talk about the sort of middle corridor development and investment is going into the logistics between China and Europe and the Middle East. And so all of that kind of momentum building. So you said so the 7 years is quite a short time. Really, we're sort of still only sort of 35 years into Central Asia's development and sort of
Yeah.
reintegration and awakening. You can come up with more grandiose.
I love it. I love the reawakening and, going from almost like disconnected from the rest of the world, if you like, and back to that interconnected. And you talk about dynamic. What's so dynamic about Central Asia and the emerging market? That's one question. And then my second question to go with that is that, when you talk about emerging markets, there's also, continuous rising complexity. I keep talking about this emerging complexity because day in, day out, AI, the revolution that we're in right now, like one minute you think you've got a grasp on something from a tech perspective, and the next day it's like, Anthropic or whatever, something new's come out, you're like, here I go again. Like there's got to be that going on in terms of Central Asia. So it's dynamic, it's interconnected, it's an emerging market, and then there's this continuous emerging complexity. Like, how does that all work?
I suppose in the past, one way that you define the difference between, let's say, sort of developed markets and emerging markets was the level of stability from a kind of governance and legal and political perspective. Say, well, developed markets like Europe, the US, they're stable, they're predictable, you know where you stand. Whereas emerging markets, you've got no idea. I mean, they could change their policy overnight. Now, things aren't quite like that anymore. I mean, a lot of what markets that one would have considered to be more stable and predictable, take the US, for example, no longer that, no longer the sort of
Yeah.
you could build things, and a rather less reliable partner for a lot of its sort of allies as well as sort of for other countries in the world. So on a relative level, in some ways, maybe emerging markets are, well, they haven't necessarily become more stable. Everything else has become less stable. So they're maybe
Yeah,
less
exactly.
emerging in that sense, which I don't think is that's necessarily a good thing. I think that stability elsewhere was a good thing. But one thing you do get in when there is greater instability is you also get greater opportunity to, I think, do bigger things. When everything is set and everyone's kind of happy with the status quo, changing things becomes more difficult
Yeah,
because you feel like you have more to lose than you have to gain. And I think that's a challenge for somewhere like the UK at the moment is everyone's sort of much more worried about what they could lose than without
risk
realizing.
averse is what comes up for me, risk averse, like, yeah, in comparison to that.
Whereas if you're starting from a much lower base, you do have more to gain. Like you could make your life 50, 100, 500% better
Mm.
which is quite difficult to imagine doing from Australia or from the UK. Like that would
Yeah.
take really quite an extreme scenario. And you look at, okay, we don't do anything in Latin America, but you look at Argentina. Like, why was Milei elected? Why has he had that mandate to enact pretty extreme sort of economic and in some cases sort of political reforms? Is because the situation had got so bad. Your thing is like, well, how can it get much worse? This guy might be able to solve it. And actually, look, Georgia during the Rose Revolution, the reason that you were able to kind of have that and Saakashvili was able to come to power is things had got so bad that the sort of alternative of, yeah, we'll risk it on the guy who's offering some maybe quite crazy things, but can actually potentially change things or not. The countries we're investing in are not at that level of sort of economic instability. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But I think that broader level of instability and the fact that things are not as set, the ability to really differentiate and improve things is much greater. And that is the opportunity. That's really where you make money as an investor as well.
What are you seeing as the biggest improvements happening then right now in Central Asia? Like, and without comparing it to the rest of the global market,
Yeah.
I sort of am asking that question though. Like, what are you seeing?
So I think there's kind of two angles which I think are uh, particularly seeing at the moment. One is that middle corridor. So the logistics and the investment into the logistics infrastructure for the land route between China and Asia and sort of Turkey and Europe. That has been sort of picking up momentum over the last 10 years or so. It's getting a sort of another sort of wind in its sails with everything that's happening in
Middle.
Iran and the Middle East at the moment to sort of reduce reliance on shipping lanes and to provide an alternative sort of logistics route. That level of investment has a significant impact on all of the countries that it travels through. It increases the ability for them also to export products from their markets to other countries. And I think that secular trend over the next sort of 5, 10, 20 years is only going to increase. And it's really just recreating what used to exist anyway in the past, which was the Silk Road that by camel. Now it comes by train and truck, but brought it from the east to west and west to east. So that's sort of really one noticeable trend that's going on. And the other is the increasing level of technology adoption.
Yeah.
And that is clearly, I'm biased when I say that because that's what we're investing in. But if you look kind of at the upper end of the spectrum, there's a company out of Kazakhstan called Kaspi, spelled Kaspi. That is a consumer super app that includes both financial services, e-commerce, logistics, but has also then launched travel and a bunch of other verticals as well. That company is listed in London and on NASDAQ, currently valued plus $15 billion. Three-quarters of the population use it on a monthly basis. It is a huge success story that's demonstrated what you can do. And that's in a country of 20 million people. It's not a sort of
Yeah.
huge country. And they've now expanded in Turkey. They bought the second largest e-commerce company there. And they're trying to build a similar ecosystem there, kind of a pan-Turkic sort of similar to Mercado Libre in Latin America, all the way down to the much sort of smaller scale where you see companies being built that are solving everything from sort of inventory management, HR solutions, cross-border logistics. And we have a bunch of investments in different spaces. All of that being underpinned by high smartphone and internet penetration, that young population who want a sort of technology first way to sort of go about living their lives, both as individuals, but also in a kind of business environment as well.
Yes, fascinating. Because I guess my question is around these founders. You know, like, are they younger? Like, they have to. Are they younger founders? And you know, like, what are you noticing about these founders? Like, do they have, like, when you think about, and I also think about the different innovation hubs around the world. There's Silicon Valley. You know, there's Europe, and then you look at Israel, and it's just like huge innovation. And then you're talking about Kaspi coming out of Central Asia. Everyone talks like the big around the Silicon Valleys of the world. And yet there's all these other innovation hubs and ecosystems that just don't get the credit's the wrong word. You know what I mean though? They just don't get the, and yet here they are, like creating some of the most incredible products in the world that are reshaping and shaping the future of, like you say, technology, financial, all of that. These founders, is there anything that you notice from, I guess, from the younger generation that is different? Like, do they still, I guess my question is, do they still get super stressed? Like the classic founder, you know, no day is ever the same. You know, it's they're constant working 24/7, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve. You know, some days you're just like, I mean, I'm talking from a founder perspective myself. Are does that all still happen with the younger, in what you see in terms of the founders that you deal with?
Yeah, I mean, so we have invested in founders from sort of folks in their 20s through to much older founders as well. Like,
Yeah.
uh, and that there is no sort of singular sort of background that they have or education that they have. You get a really broad range. They are much more diverse, I think, inherently than markets like the UK or US. There is no sort of Ivy League for them to go to or MBA for them to get locally. Some of them have international experience, some don't. Some have worked for international sort of companies in their local country. Some might have had some education abroad, some might not. I think that same level of grit and determination and stubbornness and slight denial of reality is a prerequisite to be successful in Uzbekistan or in the US. Like
Yeah.
it is not a normal thing to go and do to found a business. It is irrational in many ways. If anything, there are even more reasons not to do it in a country like Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, because if you're smart enough to do it, you can probably get a good job at a bank or a multinational or
Yeah.
the government, great stability. That's what your parents want you to go and do. That's like why you went and did everything, why they paid for your education. And then you're trying to tell them like, oh no, I'm going to go and set up my own company. And they're like, no, 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 I did all that work so that you didn't have to go and sort of have this stress in your life.
Yeah, I know. We're crazy entrepreneurs. We've got this kind of, there was something I read a while ago, someone, or is it someone that I interviewed someone on the pod and they said being an entrepreneur is a superpower. I think it is.
Yeah.
Because you have to have the grit, you have to have and I guess for me, another question I have for you is that when I read out your bio and, that willingness to build trust before outcomes are even obvious, there's also this trust that you, like with an investor and the founder. What does that what does that look like? What is, like, in terms of enduring partnerships, especially from, dealing with a founder at times like this as well, certain times. What is it that you believe is a strong partnership, or what does Sturgeon believe is a strong partnership?
So the way we've set ourselves up is in each of our kind of core markets, we have an on the ground presence, either full time or part time. Now, those are kind of individuals who are based in the country. They know they know the market well. They have good connections, and that helps us both when it's sort of finding companies, but also that, so you say, sort of building trust with founders, with other ecosystem stakeholders and players. I also travel a lot. I'm on the road sort of 20, 30, 40% of the time, depending on the month, spending time in the countries where we're investing, which is lucky for me because I want to go on holidays to these places anyway. So
Yeah.
that's a very good alignment of interest. I mean, typically we've known the founders we invest in for 12 months or more when we invest. So we like to get to know them when they're maybe too early for us or when they're maybe doing something else. So we can kind of build a relationship that isn't just purely at that point in time about raising money. So that I think it's always a bit difficult when you know that every answer is caveated by that the ultimate goal for them is to get money from you. And even if it is, but if it's not at that point in time, you can have a sort of franker and more honest conversation. And through that way, that when we're investing is not like we're going from a standing start. We're not saying, "Oh, right, brilliant, let's jump into bed together and like carry on for the next 10 years." Is actually something you say, well, okay, we've known each other for a while. We've come to think that this is a relationship that makes sense from us providing the capital. Obviously, founders are doing almost all of the work. Very little bit. We provide some money and then we try not to get in the way. But through that, to have, as I said, not to come from a standing start, to have that sort of momentum already when you come into the relationship.
It's super important. We've got 5 minutes to go, so I'm conscious of making sure I don't ask too many more questions that require big responses because I feel like I could talk for a while about this one. You said that there's still a long way to go. What do you mean by that when you say we still have a long way to go? Like, again, we're in this huge 2026 is going so fast. Like, we're in June in less than a week or two. And, like even 7 years hearing you, and that is just like, it's not a long time, So when you say you still have a long way to go, what is it that is what is there still a long way to go? Like, what needs to still be shaped,
Yeah.
formed?
One thing we look at in these markets as a way of sort of comparing the countries we invest in to say other emerging markets is this concept of VC funding per capita. So sort of the number of venture dollars raised in a year relative to population. And if you look at our markets, you're sort of $1, $2, sometimes less than $1 VC funding per capita. Now, I'm not comparing to the US or China or India, these much more Europe, these much more developed ecosystems. I'm looking at markets like Brazil, Turkey, Mexico, Indonesia as sort of benchmarks of where we think our countries can get to over the next sort of 5, 10 years. And there you're looking at anywhere from sort of 5 to 10 plus dollars per capita. So a sort of 5 to 10x increase
Yes.
in what we have. Now, I think that gives you a sense of where we need to go. And part of that is, yes, bringing in more funding to these markets. Some of that comes from us, but it also other international investors starting to look at the country, which is driven by the best way for that to happen is for there to be success cases locally. If you have those success cases, then people will follow sort of where the money is. I think by and large. The government is also sort of helping that, pushing money in through sort of fund to fund structures to attract more investors. But it also just takes time because to build a big business doesn't happen overnight. So you are relying on just the passage of 5 to 10 years for like Caspi today. Yeah, I talk about it today. That's taken 20 years to get to that
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah,
Now,
I know. I
there
think we
has
forget
been
about that, don't we? We think about it as like an overnight success, and then you're like, there's a 20-year. I have to remind myself of that quite often. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's our expectations have been distorted by some of these kind of AI applications that have shown revenue growth that is just on a totally different scale. And there's actually one where the majority of their team are from Kazakhstan. It's a business called Higgsfield. They're a video generation platform, and they've now crossed 300 million in ARR, roughly 12 months, a little bit over 12 months from when they sort of launched commercially. Now, that totally different end of the spectrum to what sort of Caspi has
Yeah.
done. And I think it distorts some expectations about really what it takes or the time it takes to build sort of long-term enduring businesses. But it also shows what is possible in the AI kind of era and what can be done with a team in Kazakhstan to build a global business catering to sort of brands and agencies around the world.
Yeah, I think it's what's possible. I also think it's what is just, I'll use the word hype. There's a lot of like it's like it's kind of peaking, and it's going to be like, and there's going to be a lot of businesses that don't succeed because they're just almost like
Yep.
these one hit wonders. One final question for you, and I had it written down earlier, and you can give me a 1 minute answer. I've interviewed quite a few people in VC, and the stats around women are quite astounding in terms of, women LPs, women founders, women seeking fundraising within the within the Asian market, like where you are, like in all the different markets you're playing in. Is that noticeable as well? Like, is it across the board? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, oddly, well, no, yes, it broadly tracks. So we sort of track the number of female founders we backed, the number of sort of female employees at the companies we invest in, how that compares to sort of national average or sort of elsewhere. And yeah, we don't see nearly as many female founders as we do male founders.
Yeah.
In our second fund, 2 out of the 11 companies have female co-founders. And actually, we're doing another deal at the moment that is a female founder. So we'll be, I suspect, probably slightly above global averages, but still not kind of
Mm.
perhaps where you would like it to be. There are certain societal kind of pressures in the countries we're investing that
Yeah.
are maybe a bit different to what you get in sort of Europe or the US. Not that that is an excuse, but it is a reality of the sort of
No,
markets you're
totally.
investing
Yeah.
in. Uh, so the kind of, like, in some ways is where I do see a female founder come through is, they've had to get through even more to get to that point. And if they're still around, clearly got something. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to make sense for us, if it's going to align. So I see it as a positive signal because I know how difficult it's been for them to get to that
Yeah.
point.
They're almost like the sturgeon, aren't they? Like they're like it keeps coming back to the sturgeon, the sturgeon fish. Last but not
Surviving
least,
somehow.
yeah, totally right. Surviving, thriving, all the in betweens. Last but not least, you love traveling. You obviously get to travel. What did you say? 20, 30, 40% of your time. How do you like how do you manage it all? Like, I mean, working holiday, like it's a workation, if you like. How do you keep the fresh perspectives? How do you kind of look after yourself from a recovery, active recovery
The advantage I have is that I enjoy it. So when I'm tired, I'm tired, but I'm doing something I enjoy. So it's never as bad or as difficult. I think if I was having to fly somewhere and do something I wasn't enjoying, then it would be more difficult mentally and physically. I don't know. I've done this for nearly 9 years. It's now just kind of become normal. I can't really imagine doing anything else, which is not necessarily a sort of sustainable, healthy, long term answer. But it also just is sort of, okay, I'm a bit tired. You get on with it. You don't sort of get too caught up in it. If you allow yourself to think, oh God, I must be really tired because I've just done an overnight flight, you'll feel tired, you'll feel like crap, and you will not be able to do your job. But you say, okay, yeah, I'm tired, but I've got to do this thing, just kind of get on and do it.
Yeah, I also think that, like, lastly, I'll just I'll share this, and I forgot to say hello to all the listeners at the start of the
Yeah.
pod. So hello, everybody. It's we're at the end. Hello. I think that the other part for me is when you are working and traveling, you get those novel experiences though. So you may feel like energy's low, except I just think when you're in different environments, you get that fresh perspective, and I think that
Yeah.
helps in those situations as well.
And I'm also conscious that the founders we're investing in are working like 100 times harder than I am. So if I'm feeling a bit tired, it's like, yeah, but they are working harder. So I can't just sort of wallow in my
Yeah.
own self pity about, oh, I'm a bit tired. You just have to get on with it.
I love that you've got the empathy for the founders. It works both ways, but I do like that you've got the empathy. Robin, how do we find out more about Sturgeon Capital? How do we find out, more about you as well?
Check out our website or get in touch through LinkedIn. Always happy to share more information on the countries we're investing in, the companies we're investing in, really anything. A lot of our role is acting in some ways like sort of brand ambassadors for country ambassadors for the region that we invest in. But yeah, get in touch through LinkedIn, check out our website, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and I really just love that Sturgeon, is that it's stoic, it's grit, it's like constantly adapting, it's shaping the future as well. And I love that you talk around this interconnected ecosystem, not just from the businesses that you're investing in, and also the fact that you're, welcoming in other VCs into the countries that you're in because, the more investment going into these countries, the more opportunities that exist, and that's where the possibilities are endless. So hopefully we finish this on time for you, Robin. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, B. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, and enjoy your afternoon. Talk
You
soon.
too.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.